Okay, we're going to get back into this, and we left off talking about permanent and temporary changes. And so really what this is coordination with your HR saying how many they expect permanents to come on board or to leave in terms of people, and then temps as well, how many they're bringing on, how many will be being let go in a certain pay period. So that's how that works. Pretty straightforward. One person, negative one person, or whatever the amounts are. I want to make note when you get the template, these are actually going to be not here. These are going to be hidden. So funding levels, we're funded at a certain amount. This is the total MRV funding, aggregated, accumulated over time, and then perfect execution is 100%. You know that we use it in the chart. So what I want to do with this is actually to go to review, unprotect the sheet, no password, so it doesn't ask me to enter a password. This is a table, so I'm turning off those filter buttons so it makes it look nice. So I'm going to go ahead and select these four, right click and hide them. Since it was in the video, I figured I might as well explain to you where it went to if you picked up on that. And you see a few other hidden ones here and here. These are intermediate calculations that need to happen so that these projections come out looking correct. So that's all that is. I'm going to go back in here and protect and say select locked and unlocked cells and hit OK, no password. That's all that is. So we need to move on to the LWOP part. Now I'm highlighting this because I'm making some notes in here. There are very specific uses for this column, and then there are specific uses for this column. This column is used for members LWOP extrapolated remainder of the fiscal year is the note. These are used for when people are leaving and it affects multiple pay periods. So for example, let's say that in this pay period I know that this person's going to be on LWOP because the paperwork was turned in and that's what's going to happen. So that one member, this is entered in terms of people, one member starts LWOP right there. Alright, so in terms of a work year, well, how does that affect it? So that one person not showing up and not putting time in, 0.808 work years, right? So that ends up in here. But in terms of extrapolating throughout the year to get a projection, that one person not being at work, assuming that they're not being backfilled, is going to have an effect for the remainder until they return. So a positive number one means that they're going on LWOP, because if you were to ask me how many people are on LWOP, I'm going to say one. The tool gives you the ability to do a negative one as well, and let me explain that. So how many people on LWOP? One, and then you could say how many people are coming back from LWOP. This is the LWOP column. You would say negative one. So let's say this person was gone for this amount of time. I'm going to put negative one, meaning they're returning from LWOP, and then enter that. So what happens here? Final hourly projection. We were executing this many hours, then this person goes on LWOP, full 80-hour period in LWOP. So we go from here to here. 80 hours is the difference for every pay period until they come back from LWOP, and then the extrapolation is back out to the end again. So same with work years. 9.73 dips a little bit and then comes back to 9.73. So let me give you an example here of how this works. Well, before I do that, I'll go here. So another way to look at LWOP is, okay, so this guy went LWOP for several pay periods. What about small LWOP adjustments like maternity leave? Let's say they're going to be on maternity leave for 3 pay periods, and that's 80 hours of pay period for that one person, right? So I'm going to put in, this column is going to be added in hours because it only affects that one pay period. You know how this extrapolates down and affects all the future pay periods? This is only going to have an effect on the current. So I'm going to put 80 in here because this new mother is going to have 80 and 80 hours that they're not going to be in there. And just by the way, let's say they left in the middle of the pay period. 40, completely legitimate, no problem. Just put in the fractional hours. And what we see is that now we are affecting in this pay period just that there. So let me take these out so that you can see this. If we just have small incremental pay periods to adjust, 40, right? And then back here, and it does not carry on. It goes right back to the part where before we had that. So take these 280 so you can see that. This pay period only, it jumps 40 hours and goes right back. So incrementally, in real life, this may be multiple people, so you'll coordinate with your HR and they'll say it's 222 hours is what we have paperwork for. Just enter 222, and then it affects that pay period and goes back to what it was, and the execution adjusts as well. So quick use case example of this, I'll tell you the story of Josh and Wendy. And let's say Josh and Wendy, Wendy's a maintainer, Josh is a logistics guy, and they're going to deploy. They've got a 6-month deployment, and they're not deploying at the same time and on the same pay period, and they're deploying somewhere in between the pay period. So it's not a perfect little, you're going to deploy on the first Monday of a pay period. So what happens is to be as accurate as we can with the data we have, I'm going to say this right here. I'm going to say Josh is going to leave right here in this pay period, but he's going to leave in the middle. So 40 hours of LWOP for that pay period right there. And then Josh is going to have start his full pay periods of LWOP right here. So you see how that extrapolated out all the way to the end. And then Josh is going to be gone. I said 6 months, but I'm going to just go ahead and take a stab here. -1, Josh is coming back. And that's the first full pay period. Josh returned 80 hours. But he came back, and Josh doesn't want to miss a dime. So he comes back and does -32 hours of LWOP. He came back in that fractional part of that pay period. So that's Josh right there. So that accounts for Josh's part of the pay period where he left, the full pay periods, and then he comes back. So that we have that taken care of. Now the next part is going to be for Wendy. Now Wendy's a maintainer, and she's going to deploy as well. So in this pay period, she leaves with 24 hours of LWOP. So 3 full days, not a full week of work, and then she leaves here and then comes back here, and you basically, and let's say 24, -24, you kind of have to look at what your HR gives you in terms of when the pay period they're coming back, okay, when it is that they're going to be returning, if it's incremental, and then let's say there's maternity leave here, 80 hours at a time. Let's say we know that for some reason, let's say 4 people are going to be missing their 80-hour work shift here, so 320. We're only affecting that pay period, and you can see how this builds out. So as I continue, just 1, -1, these are all updating and doing that math for you, and you can see our execution here. So this is the important part. This is what makes all this make sense and be powerful. As I build out the reality of my work here, based upon who I know is coming and going in terms of perms and temps, permanents and temporaries, and then what LWOP I know is going to happen, I'm going to see this projected execution. It also comes out onto the front page here in terms of where I think I'm at, but we need to have the ability to put in these incremental changes, these incremental differences that all add up to the same thing. So let's say that there's an RCP coming back like there is in my unit. These numbers do not include necessarily the LWOP time or the members time. So that is to say they're still permanent employees, but they're not in the numbers. Let's say I already checked. I went and looked to see they've already exhausted their mill leave. They've exhausted any amount of annual leave that they're going to do, and their paperwork says LWOP starts here, and I don't have that reflected. So I'm going to say 5 people. Let's say 5 people way back here started on LWOP. I'm sorry, let me back up. 5 people were not in the numbers here, and then they're going to return from LWOP. So this is our particular case. This is an RCP where it started in a prior year, so they're going to come back. In this case, it's negative LWOP. They're returning from LWOP. So I've got 5 people that are just going to jump right back on board for the remainder of the year, And I need a plan for that because I've got temps on board. I backfilled last fiscal year. In terms of the mission, fixing planes or something, they don't care about when it happened in the fiscal year. They're just trying to fix planes and deploy and come back home to their families. So they're going to come back and I need a plan for it. So -5. Now I'm at 98.74%. And then I've got another. So Josh and Wendy were here, right? But I talked to my HR guys, so maybe I make notes. But the net effect, I got another 5 guys coming back right there from deployment. Now I'm at 100%. So this is just pushing out what we know is going to happen. And then I'm at -1 here. So I'm going to put -5 because in our RCPs, don't we see 15, 20, 30 people going? Now we're scheduled to over execute because now I've accounted for people coming back from LWOP that were already permanent employees. So in terms of planning factors, now I need to look and say, well, how many temps do I have on board? And I'm kind of trying to follow through this example. Right now I've got 29 temps on board. So FWG, FMB, get to the decision makers and say, sir, I'm going to just do a rough example. If we had to let go of 20 of our temps right here in this pay period before the fourth quarter, that would bring us just back inside of our 100% projected execution. So rough example, but as that scenario set up, that's how that would work. Returning from the RCP, they were LWOP, we confirmed it. These were when they were starting. There's incremental things, hourly pay period adjustments, and then of course normal business happens. Permanent employees come and go. Temps come and go, so it may be much more laid out than this, but enter those in there as such. Positive means they're coming on. In terms of permanent and temps, we're hiring one, we're releasing one. LWOP is the inverse because if it is LWOP, then that means they're without pay. So one positive LWOP is without pay, -1 means they're returning from. And then we play this out throughout the year. So that's the power of this tool. It's going to take some getting used to. It's going to take time to wrap your head around it. If you're a seasoned veteran and just want to use this tool, you may pick up on this super quick and just dive right in. If you're new, please take the time to play around with this and make this make sense to you. At the end of the day, all of this stuff happening means 5.612 hours, and that pushes out into the front page, the front here, 5.61, adds to the projections, and now we're here, 99.47, 1.39 work year delta, 99.47. So this says 99.71. Small rounding errors basically, depending on how much is going on. The calculations extrapolating here versus the calculations coming out here. So very small rounding errors could be seen in that. Just wanted to let you know that that could happen. So 259.23, 259. So there's about a 0.6 work year difference in here because of the amount of change that's happening here. So just be aware, but it gives you the ability to extrapolate. The last thing are the charting. The charting here is going to show you 3 things. Work year execution by pay period, and it's going to show you your funded work years straight across every pay period, actual work year execution as we execute, and then final work year projection. So it's going to give you that visual. We're going to do the second one, projected versus actual in terms of percentage. So based upon what we know what's going to happen, slight over execution, and then based upon what we know here, this is our ceiling. If we get above this line, we're in trouble, and this straight line is showing you what the trajectory is for that. So that is pretty much the CivPay tool in a nutshell with respect to the projections. We're going to come in here and ensure that we're adding as best to our best of our knowledge as things change. It's going to extrapolate that into the future. Now if you're worried about at all, as I mentioned, these rounding errors, because you may say that's a half a work year or something like that, remember that as the actuals flow in, these projections are based on these numbers. When that next pay period data come in, it's going to replace these. The projection is going to become the actual because we're never going to be 100% right. We're never going to be able to tell. Let's say we have a temp employee that we just hired over here, one temp. Okay, we're assuming that's 80 hours. A lot of times temps don't do 80 hours in a pay period. So when the actuals roll in, they will replace these over time, and so that will refine that. And so in terms of the rounding error, it won't be that way whenever you get closer to the end of the year. So if you're coming into class, we're going to spend several hours on this tool. If you need to go back and look at these videos, please do, to make that make sense to you, so that you can use this as a decision support tool. It's not easy by any means, but it is a way to fully manage your CivPay program as it is now. Leave comments, email us, or leave comments on the SharePoint. If you have any questions, we will get back to you.